What the picture must have in common with reality in order to be able to represent it after its manner, rightly or falsely, is its forms of representation. The picture The picture can represent every reality whose form it has. The spatial picture, everything spatial, the colored, everything colored, etc. 272 to 172. The picture, however, cannot represent its forms or representations. It shows it forth. 2173. The picture represents its objects from without its standpoint, its form of representation. Therefore, the picture represents its object rightly or falsely. 2174. But the picture cannot place itself outside of its form or of representation. 218. What every picture or whatever form must have in common with reality in order to be able to represent it at all, rightly or falsely, is the logical form, that is, the form of reality. 2181. If the form of representation is the logical form, then the picture is called a logical picture. 2182. Every picture is also a logical picture. On the other hand, for example, not every picture is spatial. 219. The logical picture that can depict the world. 2.2. The picture has the logical form of representation in common with what it pictures. 2201. The picture depicts reality by representing a possibility of the existence and non-existence of atomic facts. 2202. The picture represents a possible state of affairs in a logical space. 2203. The picture contains the possibility of the state of affairs which it represents. 2.21. The picture agrees with reality or not. It is right or wrong, true or false. 2.22. The picture represents that what it represents, independently of its true or falsehood, through the form of representation. 2221. What the picture represents is its sense. 2222. In the agreement of or disagreements of its sense with reality its true or falsity consists. 2223. In order to discover whether the picture is true or false, we must compare it with reality. 2224. It cannot be discovered from the picture alone whether it is true or false. 2225. 225. There is no picture which is a priori true. 3. The logical picture of the facts is the thought. 3001. An atomic fact is thinkable, means we can imagine it. 3.01. The totality of true thoughts is a picture of the world. 3.02. The thought contains the possibility of the states of affairs which it thinks. What is thinkable, it is also possible. 3.03. We cannot think anything unlogical, for otherwise we should have to think unlogically. 3.031. It uses to be said that God could create everything except that was contrary to the laws of logic. The truth is, we could not say of an unlogical world how it will look. 3032. To present in language anything which contradicts logic is as possible as in geometry to present by its coordinates a figure which contradicts the laws of space, or to give the coordinates of a point which does not exist. 300321. We could present especially an atomic fact which contradicted the laws of physics, but not one which contradicted the laws of geometry. 304. An a priori true will be one whose possibility guaranteed is true. 3.05. We could only know a priori that a thought is true if its truth was to be recognized from the thought itself, without an object of comparison. 3.1. In the proportion the thought is expressed perceptibly through the senses. 3.11. We use the sensibly perceptive sign, sound or writing sign, etc. of the proportions as a projection of the possible states of affair. The method of projection in the thinking of the sense of the proposition. 3.12. The sign through which we express the thought I call the propositional sign, and the proposition in the propositional sign in its projective relation to the world. 3.13. To the proposition belongs everything which belongs to the projection, but not what is projected. Therefore, the possibility of what is projected, but not is itself. In the proposition, therefore, its sense is not yet contained, but the possibility of expressing it. The content of the proposition means the content of the significant proposition. In the proposition, the form of its sense is contained, but not its content. 3.14. The propositional sign consists in the fact that its elements, the words, are combined in a definite way. The prepositional sign is a fact. 3.141. The preposition is not a mixture of words, just as the musical theme is not a mixture of tones. The preposition is articulate. 3.142. Only facts can express a sense. A class of names cannot. 3.143. That the prepositional sign is a fact is concealed by the ordinary form of expression, written or printed. For in the printed proposition, for example, the sign of a proposition does not appear essentially different from a word. Thus, it was possible for Frege to call the proposition a compounded name. 3014-31. The essential nature of the prepositional sign becomes very clear when we imagine it made up of special objects such as tables, chairs, books, instead of writing signs. The mutual spatial position of these things then expresses the sense of the proposition. 3040-32. We must not say the complex sign A or B says as stand in relation R to B, but we must say that A stands in a certain relation to B, says that A or B. 3144. States of affairs can be described but not named. Names resembles points. Propositions resembles arrows, they have sense. 3.2. In propositions, thoughts can be so expressed that to be objects of the thoughts correspond the elements of the prepositional sign. 3201. These elements I call simple signs on the prepositions completely analyzed. 3202. The simple signs employed in preposition are called names. 3203. The name means the objects. The objects, it is meaning. A is the name sign as A. 3.21. To the configuration of the simple signs in the prepositional signs corresponds the configuration of the objects in the states of affairs. 3.22. In the preposition, the name represents the object. 3221. Objects I can only name. Signs represent them. I can only speak of them. I cannot assert them. A preposition can only say how a thing is, not what it is. 3.23. The postulate of the possibility of the simple signs is the postulate of the determinateness of the sense. 3.24. A proposition about a complex stands in internal relation to the proposition about its constituent part. A complex can only be given by its description, and this will either be right or wrong. The proposition in which there is mention of a complex, if this does not exist, becomes not nonsense but simply false. That a propositional element signifies a complex can be seen from an indeterminateness in the propositions in which it occurs. We know that everything is not yet determined by this proposition. The notation for generally contains a prototype. The combination of the symbols of a complex in a simple symbol can be expressed by a definition. 3.25. There is one and only one complete analysis of the proposition. 3.251. The proposition expresses what it expresses in a definite and clearly specifiable way. The proposition is articulate. 3.26. The name cannot be analyzed further by any definition. It is a primitive sign. 3261. Every definite sign identifies via those signs by which it is defined, and the definitions show the way. Two signs, one a primitive sign and one defined by the primitive signs, cannot signify in the same way. Names cannot be taken to pieces by definition, nor any sign which alone and independently has a meaning. 3262. What does not get expressed in the sign is shown by its application. What the sign conceals, the application declares. 3263. The meanings of primitive signs can be explained by elucidations. Elucidations are propositions which contains the primitive signs. They can therefore only be understood when the meanings of these signs are already known. 3.3. Only the proposition has sense. Only in the context of a proposition has a name meaning. 3.31. Every part of a proposition which characterizes its sense I call an expression, a symbol. The proposition itself is an expression. Expressions are everything essential for the sense of the proposition that propositions can have it in common with one another. An expression characterizes a form and a content. 3311. An expression presupposes the forms of all proportions in which it can occur. It is the common characteristics mark of a class of propositions. 3312. It is therefore represented by the general form of the proposition which is characterized, and in this form the expression is constant and everything else variable. 3313. An expression is thus presented by a variable whose values are proportions which contains the expressions. In the limiting case, the variables become constants, the expressions a proposition. I call such a variable a propositional variable. 3314. An expression has meanings only in a proposition. Every variable can be conceived as a propositional variable, including the variable name. 3315. If we change the constituent part of a proposition into a variable, there is a class of proportions which are all values of the resulting variable propositions. This class in general still depends on what by arbitrary agreements we mean by part of that proposition. But if we change all those signs whose meaning was arbitrarily determined into variables, there always remains such a class, but this is now no longer dependent on any agreement. It depends only on the nature of the proposition. It corresponds to a logical form, to a logical prototype. 3316. What values the propositional variable can assume is determined. The determination of the values is the variable. 3317. The determination of the values of the propositional variable is done by indicating the proposition whose common mark the variable is. The determination is a description of these proportions. The determination will therefore deal only with symbols, not with their meaning, and only this is essential to the determination, that it is only a description of symbols and asserts nothing about what is symbolized. The way in which we describe the proposition is not essential. 3318. I conceive the propositions, like Frege and Russell, as a function of the expression contained in it. 3.32. The sign is the part of the symbol perceptible by the senses. 3321. Two different symbols can therefore have a sign, the right-hand sign or the same sign. In common, they then signify in different ways. 3322. It can never indicate the common characteristic of two objects that we symbolize them with the same signs but by different methods of symbolizing. For the sign is arbitrary, we will therefore will choose two different signs, and there then will be what was common in the same symbolization. 3323. In the language of everyday life, it's very often happens that the same word signifies in two different ways, and therefore belongs to two different symbols, or what two words which signify in different ways are apparently applied in the same way in the proposition. Thus, the word is appears as the copula, as the sign of equality, and as the expression of existence. To exist as an intransitive verb like to go, identical as an adjective. We speak of something but also of the fact of something happening. In the proposition green is green, where the first word is a proper name and the last an adjective, these words have not merely different meaning, but they are different. There are different symbols. 3324. Thus there Thus there easily arise the most fundamental confusions of which the whole of philosophy is full. 325. In order to avoid these errors, we must employ a symbolism which excludes them by not applying the same sign in different symbols, and by not applying signs in the same way which signify in different ways. A symbolism, that is to say, which obeys the rules of logical grammar, of logical syntax. The logical symbolism of Frege and Russell is such a language which, however, does still not include all errors. 3326. In order to recognize the symbol in the sign, we must consider the significant use. 3327. The signs determines a logical form only together with its logical syntactic application. 3328. If a sign is not necessary, then it is meaningless. That is the meaning of Occam razor. If everything in the symbolism works as thought, a sign had meaning, then it has meaning. 3.33. In logical syntax, the meaning of a sign ought never to play a role. It must admit of being established without mention being thereby made of the meaning of a sign. It ought to presuppose only the description of the expressions. 3331. From this observation we get a further view into Russell's The Theory of Types. Russell's error is shown by the fact that in drawing up these symbolic rules, he had to speak of the meaning of the signs. 3332. No proposition can say anything about itself, because the propositional sign cannot be contained in itself. That is the whole theory of types. 3333. A function cannot be its own argument, because the functional sign already contains the prototype of its own argument, and it cannot contain itself. If for example we suppose that the function f(x) could be its own argument, then there would be a proposition f(x), and in this the outer function f and the inner function f must have different meanings, for the inner has the form and outer form common to both functions in only the letter f, which by itself signifies nothing. It is at once clear if instead of fu we write herewith Russell paradox vanishes. 3334. The rules of logical syntax must follow them of themselves, if we only know how everything single thing signifies. 3.34. A proposition possesses essential and accidental features. Accidental are the features which are due to a particular way of producing the propositional sign. Essential are those which alone enable the proposition to express its sense. 3341. The essential in a proposition is therefore that which is common to all propositions which can express the same sense. And in the same way, in general, the essential in a symbol is that which all symbols which can fulfill the same purpose have in common. 3.3411. One could therefore say the real name is that which all symbols, which signify an object, have in common. It will then follow step by step, and no sort of composition was essential for a name. 3342. In our notation there is indeed something arbitrary, but this is not arbitrary, namely that if we have determined anything arbitrarily, then something else must be the case. This results from the essence of the notation. 3.3421. A particular method of symbolism may be unimportant, but it is always important that this is a possible method of symbolizing, and this happens as a rule in philosophy. The single thing proves over and over again to be unimportant, but the possibility of every single thing reveals something about the nature of the world.